Have you ever met someone who simply stopped chasing? Not dramatically, not with a speech, not with a resignation letter posted online for everyone to admire. They just quietly stepped back from the race everyone else seemed to be sprinting through, and somehow they looked lighter for it, calmer, almost as if a weight had been set down they'd been carrying for so long they'd forgotten it was even there. Maybe you felt the pull of that same quiet exit yourself, late at night when the ambition you're supposed to feel just doesn't show up anymore, no matter how hard you try to summon it. What is happening inside someone when the race stops mattering to them the way it used to? The answer isn't laziness, and it isn't failure, even though it can feel that way from the outside, and sometimes even from the inside in the moments right before clarity arrives. It's something far more psychological, something that builds slowly beneath the surface, long before anyone, including the person themselves, notices the change taking place. Psychologists have a name for what's underneath this kind of quiet departure. It's called value reorientation, and it happens when a person's internal sense of what matters shifts away from external validation and towards something more self-defined, something that doesn't need an audience to feel real. For years, the rat race runs on borrowed goals. Goals you absorbed so early and so completely that you never stopped to ask whose voice they originally belonged to. You chase the promotion because everyone around you chases the promotion. You compare your timeline to your classmates, your income to your cousins, your house to your neighbors, your life to a version of success you never actually chose for yourself, only inherited. Value reorientation is what happens when that borrowed compass quietly breaks, sometimes all at once, but more often in slow, almost imperceptible fractures, and a person has to build a new one from scratch, using only what genuinely feels true to them, even if it takes years to find the words for it. And if you've been sensing, even faintly, that the goals you're working toward don't feel like yours anymore, you might already be standing at the edge of that shift, even if you haven't named it yet, even if you've been too busy to stop and look at it directly. This isn't a rare experience, and it isn't a sign that something is wrong with you, even though it can feel deeply isolating when it first begins. It's a documented psychological pattern that shows up across cultures, across income levels, across entire generations of people who built a life around achievement, only to discover the achievement didn't deliver what it had quietly promised for so long. You're not broken for feeling this. You're responding in a very human way to a system that asks for endless input and rarely tells you when enough is finally enough. A system designed to keep moving the finish line just slightly out of reach. And once you see this pattern clearly, once you stop blaming yourself for not feeling the satisfaction you were told you'd feel, you start noticing that it doesn't appear all at once. It builds gradually through a series of quiet signs that often show up long before someone makes any visible change in their life. Signs that can be easy to dismiss in the moment and only make sense when you look back at them later. In this video, we're going to walk through 5 signs that someone is quietly escaping the rat race, signs that reveal both the inner traits that make someone capable of this kind of exit and the personal turning points that often trigger it in the first place. Some of these signs will feel obvious once you hear them named, almost like something you already knew but never had the language for. Others are subtler, the kind you might only recognize in hindsight after you've already started living differently without fully understanding why, as if your behavior changed before your beliefs caught up to it. Stay with this until the end, because the signs build on each other in a specific order, and the final one ties everything together in a way that might genuinely surprise you, even if you suspect you already know where this is heading. Let's start with the first sign, the one that usually arrives quietly, almost like a whisper you could easily choose to ignore, and many people do, for a long time, before they can't anymore.
The first sign is a shrinking emotional response to external achievement. This is the moment when a promotion lands or a goal gets hit, and the expected rush of pride or relief simply doesn't show up the way it used to, the way it was supposed to, the way every story you'd been told about success implied it would. Psychologically, this connects to something called hedonic adaptation, the process by which we get used to positive changes in our lives until they no longer produce the emotional charge they once did. It's the same mechanism that explains why a raise feels thrilling for a week and then quietly becomes the new normal, as if it had never been exciting at all. For most people caught in the rat race, hedonic adaptation just means chasing the next milestone faster because the last one stopped feeling like enough almost the moment it arrived. But for someone quietly stepping away, this numbness isn't met with more striving, more hustle, more proof. It's met with a different kind of question entirely. If hitting the target doesn't feel like anything anymore, what exactly am I working toward? And who decided this target mattered in the first place? Picture someone finally getting the title they spent years pursuing, sitting in their car after the celebration dinner, engine off, lights from the restaurant still glowing behind them, waiting to feel different, waiting for the thing everyone promised would arrive, and feeling nothing shift inside them at all. Not sadness exactly, just a strange, hollow stillness where excitement was supposed to be. That silence, that absence of the expected emotional payoff, is often the very first crack in the foundation of the race. The first moment the structure reveals itself as something that was built on assumption rather than truth. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It just sits there, quietly, refusing to be ignored forever. This sign tends to deepen over months, not days, which is part of why it's so easy to miss at first. It's rarely a single disappointing promotion that does it. It's a pattern, repeated enough times across enough milestones that the person starts distrusting the entire reward structure they've been operating inside for years, sometimes decades. They start to wonder if the problem was never the achievement itself, but the story they'd been told about what achievement was supposed to feel like. And once that distrust takes root, once it stops being a passing thought and becomes something closer to a quiet conviction, it naturally opens the door to a second, more uncomfortable sign, one that moves from the absence of feeling into something far more active, far harder to push aside, and far more disruptive to a life built around constant motion. The second sign is the quiet onset of what psychologists call existential fatigue, a deep tiredness that has nothing to do with how many hours you slept last night, and everything to do with the question of why you're doing any of this in the first place. This is different from ordinary burnout, which is usually tied to overwork, to too many hours and too few breaks. It can often be solved, at least temporarily, with rest, with a vacation, with stepping away for a while. Existential fatigue persists even after the vacation ends, even after a full weekend of doing absolutely nothing, because the exhaustion underneath it isn't physical at all, it's existential, rooted in meaning rather than energy. It comes from continuing to perform a role, a career, a lifestyle that no longer feels connected to any deeper sense of purpose, even when every external measure suggests that life is going well. You might recognize this in yourself if you've ever returned from time off feeling just as drained as before you left, maybe even more drained, because the rest never actually touched the real source of the fatigue. The body recovers, the muscles relax, the sleep debt gets paid down, but the question underneath stays exactly where it was, untouched, waiting. People experiencing existential fatigue often describe a strange and uncomfortable contradiction. Everything looks fine on paper. The career is solid. The income is steady. The achievements keep accumulating. And yet there's a persistent low hum of dissatisfaction underneath all of it that simply won't go away no matter how much external success piles up on top of it. This contradiction is precisely because it doesn't make sense from the outside looking in. Friends and family might say with genuine confusion, "But you have everything you wanted. What more could you possibly need?"
And that well-meaning response only deepens the isolation, because now the person feels both exhausted and guilty for being exhausted, both unhappy and ashamed of that unhappiness. as if gratitude and fatigue couldn't possibly coexist in the same body at the same time. This is usually the point where people start quietly researching alternatives, not because they have a plan yet, not because they know exactly what comes next, but because the discomfort has become loud enough, persistent enough, that ignoring it is no longer a realistic option. And once someone starts looking, even just reading about other people's stories late at night when no one else is awake, they tend to notice something they'd overlooked before. Something that brings us directly to the third sign. The third sign is a growing skepticism towards status symbols, the visible markers of success that once felt urgently important, like the bigger house, the newer car, the more impressive job title on a business card or a social media bio. This skepticism doesn't appear as outright rejection at first. It usually starts small, as a flicker of indifference where intense feeling used to live. You see a colleague's new car pull into the parking lot, and instead of the familiar pang of comparison, the quiet calculation of how far behind or ahead you might be, there's just nothing. No envy, no admiration, just a kind of neutral observation, as if watching someone else play a game you've quietly, almost accidentally, stopped keeping score in. This connects to a well-documented psychological process called hedonic disengagement from social comparison, where a person's sense of self-worth gradually detaches from how they measure up against others, loosening its grip slowly, almost without permission, until one day the comparison simply isn't there anymore. This shift often surprises the person experiencing it more than anyone else around them. They expect to feel something, competitive, jealous, motivated to catch up, and instead they feel a strange kind of calm, almost like relief, almost like setting down a bag they didn't realize had grown so heavy over the years. Picture someone scrolling through old photos of a friend's vacation, a friend whose life used to set the bar for what success was supposed to look like, the trips, the home, the seemingly effortless happiness, and realizing they feel nothing but a mild, distant curiosity, the way you might feel looking at a stranger's life rather than a benchmark for your own. That absence of comparison isn't apathy, even though it can be mistaken for it. It's often the result of a person finally building an internal measuring stick, one based on their own values rather than borrowed ones, one that doesn't bend every time someone else's life shifts. And as that internal compass strengthens, as it becomes more trustworthy than the external one ever was, it starts demanding something the rat race rarely offers, something that feels almost rebellious in a culture built on constant output. And that demand leads directly into the fourth sign. The fourth sign is an increasing need for solitude and unstructured time, time with no productivity goal attached to it at all. Time that exists simply because the person needs it to exist, not because it serves some larger plan. In a culture that treats busyness as a virtue, almost as proof of worth, this craving can feel shameful at first, like wanting to do nothing is a character flaw rather than a basic, legitimate psychological need that everyone has and almost no one honors. But research into attention restoration and mental fatigue tells a very different story than the one most of us absorbed growing up. Constant goal-directed activity depletes a specific, finite kind of mental resource, and without periods of genuinely unstructured time, time with no agenda, no metric, no outcome to chase, that resource never fully replenishes, no matter how much sleep someone gets at night. People quietly escaping the rat race often describe craving long walks with no destination in mind, afternoons with no agenda at all, mornings where the only plan is to notice how the light moves slowly across a room as the sun rises higher. This isn't laziness, even though the old internal voice, the one trained by years of hustle culture, might insist that it is. It's the nervous system finally asking, after years of being ignored, for a kind of rest that achievement-oriented living rarely permits, rarely even acknowledges as legitimate. What makes this sign distinct from ordinary rest is the guilt that often accompanies it at first, and the way that guilt slowly, gradually fades the longer the person stays with it. Early on, unstructured time feels like it needs to be justified, explained, earned somehow. I'm resting so I can be more productive later. I'm recharging so I can perform better afterward. But as the shift deepens, as the person spends more time simply being rather than constantly producing, the justification quietly disappears entirely. The rest stops needing a purpose beyond itself. It becomes valuable simply because it feels human, because it feels like something closer to the truth of who they actually are underneath all the doing. And that shift from rest as fuel for more achievement to rest as a basic right of being alive is one of the clearest markers that someone has moved from merely tolerating the race to actively, quietly stepping outside of it altogether. This growing comfort with stillness, with silence, with empty, unscheduled hours sets the stage perfectly for the final sign, the one that gathers every previous sign together into something whole, something coherent, something that finally makes sense as a complete picture rather than scattered fragments. The fifth and final sign is the emergence of a personally defined version of success, one that looks unremarkable from the outside, even disappointing to people who knew the old version of you, but feels deeply coherent, deeply true on the inside. This is the culmination of everything that came before it, the fading emotional payoff from achievement, the existential fatigue that no vacation could touch, the quiet detachment from comparison that arrived almost without permission, the craving for unstructured time that no longer needs justifying. All of it eventually gathers, slowly, into a new definition of what a good life actually means. A definition built not from external metrics handed down by culture or family or social media, but from lived experience, from paying close attention to what actually feels true when no one else is watching or judging.
Someone might land on something as simple as having time for a daily walk before the day gets busy, being fully present for dinner with their family without checking their phone under the table, or doing work that feels honest and aligned even if it pays considerably less than what they were earning before. From the outside, this can look like settling, like giving up on potential, like wasting talent that could have gone further, climbed higher, earned more. From the inside, though, it feels like finally arriving somewhere true, somewhere that doesn't require constant performance to feel worthwhile, somewhere that doesn't ask the person to prove anything to anyone, including themselves. This is the sign that most clearly marks the difference between someone burning out and someone genuinely transforming. And the distinction matters more than it might first appear. Burnout often ends in collapse, in a person reaching a breaking point and being forced to stop, sometimes through illness, sometimes through a complete loss of motivation that leaves no other option. This is different, fundamentally different. It ends in clarity instead, in a person choosing to stop, deliberately, with intention, not because they can't continue the race anymore, but because they no longer believe the race is taking them anywhere worth going, anywhere that actually matters to them. And recognizing this distinction matters deeply, because it changes the entire emotional tone of the exit, from something tragic into something quietly courageous. It's not defeat, it's discernment, earned slowly through paying attention. Now that you've heard these 5 signs laid out one after another, take a moment to sit with them rather than rushing past the way you might rush past so much else in a typical day. Think back over the last year of your own life, slowly, honestly, without judging what you find. Has a milestone landed for you and felt strangely quiet, smaller than you expected it to feel, almost anticlimactic in a way you didn't quite know how to explain to anyone else? Have you noticed a tiredness that sleep never seems to touch, no matter how much of it you get, no matter how early you go to bed or how late you sleep in on weekends? Has comparison started to lose its grip on you, even just a little, even just sometimes, even just with certain people whose lives used to feel like a constant measuring stick? Do you find yourself craving time with absolutely nothing attached to it, time that has no purpose other than simply existing in it? And maybe somewhere quietly underneath all of this has a more personal, more honest definition of success started to take shape inside you. one you haven't said out loud yet, even to the people closest to you, even to yourself in the mirror. You don't need to have all the answers right now, today, in this moment. Just noticing these questions honestly, without flinching away from them, is its own kind of beginning, its own quiet act of self-respect. And if any of this resonated with you, even one small piece of it, consider sharing it with someone who might be standing at this same quiet edge right now. Someone who might need to hear that what they're feeling has a name, that it's been studied, that it's been felt by countless others before them, and that they are not the only one feeling it, even if it feels that way late at night when everyone else seems to be moving forward without hesitation. If this video helped you understand your own relationship to ambition and achievement a little more clearly than before, there's another side to this conversation that's worth exploring next. A conversation about what actually replaces ambition once someone steps away from it. Because stepping back from the race doesn't mean stepping back from meaning altogether. It often means redefining what drives you from somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter, somewhere that fear and comparison could never actually reach in the first place. That's a natural next layer to everything we've just walked through together, and you'll find it linked at the end of this video and in the description below, continuing this same thread a little further, in case you're ready to keep going. Before you go, thank you so much, genuinely, for sitting with this topic all the way until the end. If this gave you language for something you've been quietly feeling for a while, maybe something you didn't know how to put into words until now, give the video a like. It genuinely helps this kind of content reach more people who might need to hear it just as much as you did. And I'd love to know, down in the comments, what would your own personally defined version of success actually look like if no one else's opinion were part of the equation at all? If you were only answering to yourself? Take your time with that question. There's no rush to answer it perfectly. If you want more videos like this one, videos that look closely and honestly at the quiet psychology behind the choices we make every day, consider subscribing, and maybe tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next one when it arrives. Thank you again, truly, for being here with me through this. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.